Hey team, this is Grant David Collins and welcome to Basement Philanthropy, a place for people who do not want to wait until they're rich or retired to create meaning, impact, and connection with their time, talents, and money, regardless of the amount. On this episode, we're going to be talking about how ego is the enemy of our giving, so let's get started. Recently, I have become a student of Stoic philosophy. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, Stoicism is basically the concept that although we do not control the world around us, we do control how we respond to that same world. It's a fairly simple concept, and yet I find it very, very difficult to apply to my life. So because of that, I have been reading up on the topic, and one of my favorite authors is a man by the name of Ryan Holiday. Now, many people credit Ryan for really demystifying this practice developed originally by ancient philosophers, people like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca. And, I would agree with this assessment of Ryan. I've now read 3 of his books, The Obstacle is the Way, Courage is Calling, and Ego is the Enemy. And through them, I feel like I've started to understand not only the concept of Stoicism, but the application. And while each of these books has been really impactful, it is that last book, Ego is the Enemy, that has really struck a chord in my life, especially when it comes to giving. So instead of trying to summarize my struggle of ego and giving, I wanted to share with you a part of a voice memo that I made while I was on a hike a few weekends ago that speaks into that topic. So here it is. So I'm here walking down the road to Silver Lake up American Fork Canyon. And I just got done with a big hike this morning. And I have been thinking a lot about the concept of ego because I'm reading a book by Ryan Holiday called Ego is the Enemy. And so I've been reading it the whole day. I'm on the way down. And something that I'm noticing about myself is how much egotism I have. How much I care about what people think about me, how much I care about being seen and known as a visionary, the ability to bring ideas into this world, but maybe not execute them. There's a lot of that is kind of coursing through my mind right now as I'm walking and as I'm a part of nature. And I'm really excited that that's happening. I mean, I think viewing myself as having ego is in some ways the first step to move through that. And a lot of my ego has shown up in people not being able to see what I see. And in some ways, I do believe that I have a certain gift in that way of thinking, to be able to get above the day-to-day life, to be able to look forward and see trends and potential opportunities, especially with the work that I'm doing with giving. But I've realized that in some ways I've seen that as who I am, as the only person that could ever see it, and so therefore I'm going to just be lonely and miserable in that for the rest of my life. And what I'm seeing right now is how crazy that is with what I'm trying to accomplish. I have seen in the world so many disparities and challenges, and my way of solving for those is to help individuals see themselves as being able to get involved, as being able to catch the vision of their own potential impact and genius. And by thinking that it's unreachable, that nobody's going to be able to understand it, in some ways I'm cutting that vision off at the legs. It's in the distilling of that information in a way that people can understand it and catch it and be able to start to implement it, that the vision actually comes about. It's not in the reminiscing of what could be and this grandiose vision that I have, and telling everybody about that so that they think I'm cool or whatever it might be. And in this book, it talks about how you need to find out what you're really committed to. And what is it that you actually want to create, and focus on that. And it's become so clear to me that what I'm actually committed to is helping people see and develop the skill set of giving. And if I can do that and stay focused, laser focused on doing that in the most effective and efficient way, without worrying too much about how much credit or how much of my name is associated with it, that is where I'm going to be able to have the energy, the space, and the personal strength and courage to be able to move through things. So as you just heard, ego has been a bit of a pain in my side recently. I thought that, because I saw the world differently, or because I could see things in a way that other people couldn't, that made me somehow better than other people. But as you have probably figured out, this isn't true at all. In fact, it was actually getting in the way of the good I personally wanted to be involved with. So I have a question for you. How is ego getting in the way of your giving? Is it keeping you off the giving field because you're too comfortable on the sidelines when you really should be in the game? Is it telling you that someone else will go and help that friend of yours who is struggling? Or maybe you have a bit of an individuality complex where you could care less about what goes on outside of your small sphere of interaction. In each of these three situations that I just named, or in your individual struggle with ego, the way forward is in some ways through it. And what I mean by this is, once we identify the walls of ego in our own lives, we can step into them and eventually through them. Ego is kind of like the darkness in a room. It engulfs us until light chases it away. And from my experience, one source of light is our ability to get outside of ourselves and give. One way that I have been able to identify ego is by spending more time in nature. There is a certain clarity that comes into life when you are away from the noise of our busy world. And especially as of late, over the last couple months, I've been spending a lot of time outside, and you have seen part of the result of that. That whole voice memo came from me being out in nature. Another way that I've been able to find ego in my life, especially as it relates to things that are maybe getting in the way of giving and getting outside of myself, is by reading. I find that reading allows someone to be able to see themselves more clearly, especially if the topic of the book is something like ego is the enemy. And so I would recommend you picking up this book, and I'll leave a link in the description so that you can know exactly what book I'm talking about. And if you decide to read through it, I think you're really going to see why it has been so impactful in my life. And to give you a little bit of a taste of what is in this book, I've selected 4 of my favorite quotes that have something to do with me thinking about ego as it relates to giving that I would like to share with you right now. So, quote number 1, if ego is the voice that tells us we're better than we really are, we can say ego inhibits true success by preventing a direct and honest connection to the world around us. Quote number 2, just one thing keeps ego around: comfort. Pursuing great work, whether it is in sports, art, or business, is often terrifying. Ego soothes that fear. It's a solve to that insecurity, replacing the rational and aware parts of our psyche with bluster and self-absorption. Ego tells us what we want to hear when we want to hear it, but it is a short-term fix with long-term consequences. And finally, quote number 4, when we lack connection to anything larger or bigger than us, it's like a piece of our souls is gone. Like we've detached ourselves from the traditions we hail from, whatever that happens to be. Ego blocks us from the beauty and history in the world. It stands in our way. No wonder we find success empty. No wonder we're on a treadmill. No wonder we lose touch with the energy that once fueled us. That is just a taste of the incredible experience you will have if you take a few minutes out of your life to read this book, Ego is the Enemy. In my experience, ego isn't ever something that we fully get rid of. But over time, it seems to have less and less of a hold on us as we focus more and more on the world outside of our own. And something that I've shared in podcasts before is that we often think about ego in a black and white perspective. I'm either egotistical or I am not. And I don't actually think that's a very useful way of thinking about it. I think that ego is a part of the equation. It is something that can show up. And so as we look at it maybe more as a percentage of what we are doing or our intention, I think that there really is something useful about viewing it in that way. And we can start to see that degrade over time as we focus outside of ourselves. And that has been my experience. Over the last couple of years, it's been a grind, but I have felt that ego lessen and lessen over that time period. And I'm more able to identify when it is at play. And that has been a major, major blessing in my life as of late. Well, team, that's it for me. Let's go out in the world and create good with the time, talents, and money that are available to each of us and give ego a kick to the trash together. Talk soon.